Hey, it's Jessica Goose here on the final day of the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. And joining me right now is Dr. Kip Lukasiewicz from Nebraska. Thanks so much for taking the time here to speak with me at RealAgriculture.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure.
Explain to me, I guess, what is your presentation about and why is it important to get that message over to cattle producers?
So our presentation is about just, we call it low-stress cattle handling. It's a Bud Williams approach of handling cattle, which is looking for voluntary cattle movement. But it's more just about asking cattle, teaching people to be on the front side of a herd and teaching people how to move a herd and move individuals. And I think that's probably the most important just for keeping cattle calm, quiet, and keeping them responsive to your movement.
And it is quite impressive, even just watching you here. And we'll show a little bit of the clip here in just a moment of you moving them. And they really do go slow and in a steady line. And like you said in your presentation, is that quicker isn't always better. Explain to me that.
So many people, when I see people move today or handle cattle, they seem to always be in a big hurry. And when they're in a hurry, they usually create wrecks because they don't give cattle time to process the information which they're receiving. And they come off as the true predator in which they are. So I always try to get myself, the cattle already know that I'm a predator. I don't have to do much to teach them that. They know it by my eyes and where my eyes are on my face and so forth. And they know it in my movements. So my movements have to make them understand or teach them to understand that I understand them and their behavior, and I always try to use their voluntary motion and their natural behavior, their natural instincts. That cattle like to see what's pressuring them, so I stay off on their eye. Cattle like to follow each other. They just don't like to be grouped up and too tight where they're touching each other so much. They do social grooming out in nature, but they just don't like to be tight. And so I teach cattle just to go off as individuals and start moving and leading the herd. And that's what's important about it.
Mm-hmm. And explain to me about the left eye. You kind of made some people kind of laugh and ponder in the crowd. Yeah. And you said something about a horse. So maybe explain that scenario.
Yeah, so what a lot of people don't understand on behavior of a prey animal is that what goes in the left eye will cross the optic chiasm, go into the right side of the brain, and the information will be processed, and then it'll cross over into the left side of the brain, which is where you get your response or your reaction. What goes in the right side of the brain, or right side of the eye, crosses over in the left side, you usually get a reaction, and then the thought. So it's kind of like when your mom and dad says, think before you talk. We're trying to do the same with cattle. We're trying to allow them time to think before they respond. And what I told the people is that you always have to think about what side you get on your horse. Most people will go, I get on the left side, and you'll say why, and they'll say, well, because dad or grandpa told me to. They don't know, and so, but yet these are the same people that train horses. And I sit there and go, if you don't know nothing about them, I mean, if you're really going to train a horse well, just learn his behavior, learn something about the animal, and you'll be better off at the end.
And lastly here, what would you say is, I guess, that starting point to get yourself being slower and to get yourself moving? What are kind of some tips maybe to pass on to producers?
So just understanding that quicker is not faster. Slower typically is faster at the end. Having patience. Patience is important. Cattle have very little patience. Most people have very little patience. So if both of you have very little patience, usually the communication is not going to be clear. And so one of you have to learn to be patient, and that's usually you can control yourself. You can't always control the animal's thoughts per se. You can control them by where you position yourself, but you have to control your own patience. And so just be patient, and don't be afraid to fail. The number one thing what we do here today is I failed several times out there today. Never once do you see me get flustered or disconfigured or anything like that. When it didn't work, I just start over and I get myself in a better position and I create more energy and I get the cattle to do what I think they would like to do. Mm-hmm. So I don't make them do things, I just get them to want to do things. So that's important.
Exactly. And like I guess the old saying says, patience is always a virtue. Thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you so much.